Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Rising podcast. I am Amanda McCoy Flanagan. I am your host. We are all in on love, loss, and connection here. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode. And if you're brand new here, welcome. We talk all things emotion, from joy to grief to fear to excitement and everything in between. And today we are really lucky because we have Lisa Broberg, who is one of my good friends. And I've been really lucky to have some of my friends on the show lately. And it just feels so good because it is just like so comfortable, just really real. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lisa, and then we're going to jump into our show. So as a functional nurse and holistic wellness coach, Lisa helps ambitious individuals transform their health by reconnecting with their body's innate wisdom. She guides clients to heal at the deepest levels through nervous system regulation, emotional fluency, and personalized lifestyle design, empowering them to cultivate lasting well-being through the integration of scientific understanding and intuitive wisdom. And I love blending those two, the scientific understanding and the intuitive wisdom, right? That to me
Mhm.
feels like this is kind of where like I'm in a space of like blending like divine masculine and divine feminine, right? The masculine's like, we need to know, we need to understand, we need the logic, we need that science, right? And then like the feminine is that innate wisdom. So Lisa, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you. Why don't you tell
Thank
us
you,
a little,
Amanda.
why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what got you into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is so much fun. So my healing journey began a long time ago. It started at 16. I had anxiety as a young child. I didn't realize it was anxiety. It wasn't acknowledged as anxiety. And basically, like, my internal environment was kind of imploding on itself. And so I developed an eating disorder. That's when I began my inner healing work. And from that eating disorder, I had physical ailments. I had like legitimate mental health struggles, anxiety, depression, bulimia. It kind of went through all these different phases. But the thing that came to me most recently was during the pandemic in 2020. I didn't realize, like, I was in postpartum anxiety, which I had been a mom at that point for almost 5 years. But it wasn't until I had a breakdown as a nurse working in the pandemic in California, where I was living at the time. It was just a lot to take on top of regular life. And that's when I found functional medicine, because when I went to my regular primary, there were no answers for me. They ran tests. Everything was normal. The only solution was Zoloft. And because I was so desperate at the time, I took it. And then I went to functional medicine. And then they were able to tell me how everything actually did make sense. Essentially, I had been in such a chronic state of nervous system dysregulation with my anxiety and my inability to not only acknowledge my emotions, but to be able to express my emotions and to understand and to release my emotions. So through functional medicine, yeah, in the comprehensive intake that they did, they correlated with the timeline with a lot of different things. With as a nurse, like as an empath, I didn't realize that getting into nursing was going to totally like be the cherry on top of all of that, because I didn't realize how precious my energy was and how I did take on other people's energy. Being an empath and in nursing, there's two butting of heads there, because on one hand, in nursing, they're saying like, you need to be present with your patients and their families, and you need to give them the space to be heard and all of these things, right? But then you gotta figure out a way to compartmentalize it so you don't take it home with you. And it's like, but we're human, and how do we do that? Like, with multiple patients every day, 40 hours a week. I was working in the spinal cord injury unit when I initially started being a nurse. And that was traumatic in and of itself, physically and mentally. Then I became a mom. And on top of that, like at the time, I wasn't, because of my schedule, couldn't physically exert my body the way I had been, which for me, looking back, physical activity was a huge release for me, to release any pent up energy, because as we will talk about, like, emotions are energies in motion. And so when we can't process our emotions in a way that allows us to, maintain regulation, we're going to have more emotions loading up in our body. And so for me, at that time, I was I wasn't able to play volleyball or softball as I had been for a long time because those games were during my shifts. And so like I was working swing shift. And not only that, but because of the nature of my schedule, I was also not socializing with my friends as I once was. And so I had this disconnection from my social group. I had this disconnection from my physical health. I found other ways, like I would go hiking in the morning and stuff like that. But it became this really perfect storm. And then on top of that, the nursing and then the pandemic and then having babies throughout that. And I had developed panic disorder, OCD. I was in the ER a few times a year for anxiety attacks, chest pain for days. And all they would tell me is like, maybe you should stop drinking coffee. Maybe you need to exercise more. Here's some Ativan. There were no tool. There were no, I remember one of the doctors was like, maybe you should try meditating. And it's like, that was it. I did end up, when I really had this major breakdown is when functional medicine like made sense of everything and explained it to me from a scientific standpoint, because it is very fundamentally based in science, but also they acknowledge the human spirit aspect of it. And so I started coming at it from all angles, very holistically. I started using herbs to support my adrenal fatigue because that's what I was in. My cortisol tanked. I had like no reserves left.
Mm-hmm.
I was just so stressed out for who knows how long. And then with my having children, my body just never came back to a state of regulation. And it's so funny because I remember like being pregnant and feeling like, wow, I haven't had this much energy in a long time. And I understand now that that's like just what the body, the body's like amazing at doing what it needs to do to create human life. Then, it just takes from you. And anyway, long story short, it got to the point where now I know what healing can be for people. And yet here I am going to work every day as a nurse and only being able to push pills, procedures, and all of that. And at the time I was working in the VA, I'd worked in the VA for like 8 years of my career. I was in primary care at that time. And I had a panel of about 1,000 patients between 2 doctors. And one of the doctors was the current medical director. And one of the other doctors that I managed for was a previous medical director. And he was a very integrative doc. Like he did acupuncture. He was actually like doing things his way, which in the VA is very unheard of. And I felt so grateful to work with him because he opened my eyes to some other things that just, the possibility of like bringing in that intangible aspect of health. And he taught me about meridians and energy flow. And I had so many, like every time I would talk to him, I had more questions than I came into the conversation with, but it just like opened me up to so much more. And in conjunction with what I was learning on the outside, which I didn't even share with anyone at the time, I went back to school for functional medicine, health coaching, and just learned so much more about like, this is what we should be doing. And so coming into work every day, I felt at some point, I felt like I was lying because I'm like, here's a medication, here's a referral to a specialist. And meanwhile, knowing like I had known this for years, but the affirming experience of my healing journey just confirmed everything that like, there's so much more to what we see. Mm-hmm. And there's so much that is not acknowledged in the conventional health paradigm. And yes, we have data to support certain things, but there's so much that is out there that works, that like, if it works, it works, like even with like the placebo effect, like it's like, if anything, that shows how powerful our mind is, like, and so anyway, got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to do something where I'm in alignment, where I'm in my integrity, and I can serve people in a way that's really going to help them shift their lifestyle and their mindset and their energy, because really that's what it all boils down to. Because my understanding now, my truth is that our physical health is a representation. It's the most superficial representation of our internal environment, of our emotions, of our mental state, of the energy, the vibe that we're operating at, the vibration, because everything has a vibration. You can do all these superficial things. You can take a medication to suppress your symptoms when in reality, symptoms are really messengers from our body, trying to grab our attention, trying to point to something that needs to be addressed. And sometimes it's a whisper where it's just like a skin breakout or something. And sometimes it's screaming loudly where you have like full blown disease. It's communicating to us. And from the most superficial place in our being, the most obvious place of our being is our physical, what we can see. But a lot of the time we've already been feeling it. We just haven't been acknowledging it. And so it's about all the little micro decisions that go through our day, like how we handle stress, how we handle the difficult person, how we handle whatever, So yeah.
Yeah. So would you say, because a lot of people don't know what functional medicine is, would you say, and I love this in your bio, the integration of scientific understanding and intuitive wisdom? Would that be a good definition, like combining both?
I think a lot of functional practitioners do that, but functional medicine itself is very fundamentally science-based. This structure came about in the early 1990s, looking at the body as a whole system, a perfect system, where in conventional medicine, everything is siloed. So you go to a specialist you go to endocrinologist for your thyroid, right? Or you go to a nephrologist for your kidneys, or you go to a cardiologist for your heart, and everybody's doing all these different things, looking at this one organ system and not taking into consideration that the body is actually a perfect whole system. And so the way that functional medicine approaches physical health is coming from a place of integration and interdependence. And it looks at the body in 7 specific systems of function rather than biological organ systems. And so functional medicine, for instance, like we look at detoxification as one of the functions that our body serves. Our body has to, in order for our body to maintain its healthy state, it needs to detoxify itself, right? And then we also have cellular communications, and that incorporates our nervous system, our hormones, our blood cells, anything that actually like communicates with another part of the body to continue doing all the processes that it needs to continue. And so in this way, you can kind of get a sense that the function is what is going to be analyzed, and how well the body is able to function, and what functions are maybe dysfunctional, and how, and there's usually usually the same handful, usually I say, because there are some outliers in terms of like mold and some really funky things that happen with like Lyme disease and Epstein-Barr that can cause these chronic dysfunctional things that affect all of the different functions. But largely in part, it's a lot of the time gut issues, which are really around our ability to absorb nutrients and metabolic health, our body's ability to process sugar, and how much protein we're getting. And a lot of the time it has to do with nutrition, because we are what we consume. But then there's other times where that does get more complicated, like I said, like with like mold toxicity and like really strange things. And then one of the large proponent of is epigenetics, which is the science that we're just finding from the Human Genome Project that was completed around 2000, finding that like we used to think for up until then, and even and I have to like say this with the caveat that on average, science doesn't reach your doctor's office for an average of 17 years.
Wow.
So there's a large catch-up area here. And so epigenetics is the science that was really discovered in the early 2000s around this Human Genome Project that found that actually, contrary to the belief that genetics set our destiny, it really, really don't. It's our lifestyle, because we can turn genes on or off. And so functional medicine uses that to its advantage in that, like, okay, you're dysfunctional right now because this gene is turned on or off for whatever favorable circumstance you're looking for, right? So how do we turn it on or off to get the favorable result? Well, we need to avoid gluten. That's a very common tactic because a lot of Americans do not tolerate and are even allergic to gluten, where it causes this chronic inflammatory response. And then when your, immune system is heightened all the time, of course, like nothing else is going to work optimally because it's all wonky. Functional medicine does acknowledge the human spirit aspect because they have seen that mindset and positive psychology and the the correlations with someone having a spiritual connection, how that positively impacts their journey towards healing. So it's not necessarily that that's at the forefront of functional medicine, but there are lots of functional medicine practitioners
Okay.
who operate that way.
Thank you for explaining all of that. You were just a wealth of information. Oh my gosh, we're so lucky to have you here. You're teaching me a lot.
Thanks.
So, would you say you mentioned your anxiety? So is kind of what kickstarted your whole journey. Would you say anxiety or depression because they seem to go hand in hand, are like really the main indicators of like what, like not main, but maybe more common indicators for the general population for these unprocessed emotions that need to be dealt with, that it's coming out, it's manifesting as anxiety and depression?
For me, I'll speak for myself. Like, I didn't know that what I experienced in my internal world as a child, I didn't know that that was anxiety. I just thought that everybody experienced the world that way. And I wasn't in a home where we really talked about our feelings. It wasn't like we were encouraged to express that. It was very much a place where, like, just be quiet and do what I'm asking you to do kind of thing. So, for example, I was like 5 or 6 years old. I grew up in a really small old home that was built in literally 1920. It was my great grandmother's home. And I had just this relentless fear that my house was going to burn down at night. And I would lay in bed on my bunk bed every night, like being just like, okay, if it happens, I can just like dart out the window. And there came to be a point where like I packed a bag and put it under my sister on the bottom bunk. I put it under the bed, and it was this suitcase that my cousin handed down to me, and I packed it with like some of my favorite stuffed animals and an outfit and a blanket. My mom found it one day and she was like, "What the hell are you doing? Are you running away?" And I was like, "No, it's because the house might burn down." It was like, and that was it. Like, there was no talk about it. There was no like, why are you feeling this way? You know? And it was just, I just carried on and carried on. And, and so it was like, doesn't everybody think about that? Doesn't everybody worry that their house is going to burn down? Like, and then just, I remember also like my first job, I worked at Applebee's. Well, actually, it's my second job. I was working at Applebee's, and I would get there like 25 minutes ahead of when my shift was starting. And I was 17. I was a hostess. I had so much anxiety. I had to like get there early and prepare myself mentally because I was so anxious, and I didn't know that it was anxiety. And I remember going into this shift, and we had huddles at the beginning of our shift. Like, and I remember talking to this guy, Derek, and I was like, "So how long does it take you before you get like nervous before the shift starts?" And he's like, I never got nervous. What are you talking about? It's like this, like, what do you mean? Like, how long? Because how long is this going to last? And then really it was like college when I was living with one of my roommates. She was in therapy and she was talking about her social anxiety. And I was like, anxiety. And she was just the way she was describing it. And I was like, but isn't that normal? Like, and this is during my eating disorder. So I had been going to therapy since I was like 19, 20. And I knew that I had depression, but like, it was never pointed out to me about anxiety until I started having conversations with other people around how they were feeling. So I think there's a lot of people out there that don't know that what they're experiencing is anxiety. And this was, granted, like 25 years ago, 20 years ago. It has gotten into the conversation more these days. There's less of a stigma on it, but I still think there's plenty of people out there that don't realize that what they're experiencing internally and how distressed they feel regularly is anxiety. And the anxiety, of course, like any of these, I also just like want to point out, like, any kind of diagnosis is really this human construct to help us understand what's actually at play, right? So anxiety is like this term for this feeling of unsettling, this just kind of energy, this wound up energy, and just this sense of not feeling at ease. And then of course we have the DSM that psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose these formal conditions. But again, like just with any medical, like it's all constructs to help us understand. And one thing I love about functional medicine is that like there can be like the way that they put it is like in the middle is this diagnosis with this condition, but like there's like all these causes.
Yes.
It's not like just caused by one thing,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's what I love about functional medicine is like, for me, anxiety could be my living environment. It could be my relationships. It could be how, it could be related to my diet because when we think about this from a functional medicine standpoint, like this is something that conventional medicine has yet to formally address, but leaky gut syndrome, also known as intestinal permeability, is it's a situation where our gut becomes leaky, where it's so inflamed because of what we're ingesting that things that are supposed to be eliminated from our body through our poop are actually seeping into our bloodstream and causing chronic inflammation. And in doing that to the gut by weakening these walls, they're affecting up to 80% of serotonin that's supposed to be produced in the gut, which serotonin is the mood neurotransmitter. And 70% of our immune system is also supposed to be housed in our gut. And part of our dopamine production is also produced in our gut. And so there's also this gut brain connection here, right? But think about like if most Americans are eating the standard American diet and are having chronic disease, 60% of adults do, 40% have 2 or more.
Wow.
Then think about what's going on. And the gut is like really our first defense. Of course, some people will say the skin is the first defense, but like the gut is the first defense to what we ingest in our body. And when we have leaky gut, which by functional medicine standards, they predict that about 80% of Americans or more have this to some degree, that it's going to affect our serotonin production. We're not going to have the 80% of our serotonin production that's supposed to occur in the gut is not going to be optimized because it's dysfunctional, right? And same thing with 70% of our immune system that's housed in the gut is not going to be optimized if we have this going on. Of course, there's also the social stuff that can contribute to anxiety. But when we look at this mood disorder, that's like in this country where we have such a prevalent mental health crisis.
Yep.
Yes, there are social aspects, but like food affects our mental too.
Oh yeah. And come on, RFK. Come on, RFK.
I am so hopeful. Like, oh my God. All I can do is hope.
Seriously, right?
Yeah.
Without hope, we have nothing. But so how does one diagnose a leaky gut and cure it if 80% of us might be walking around with this?
There's obvious symptoms like reactions to food that you know, if you have like an immediate reaction or you have like immediate lethargy, if you're eating food and it's not giving you energy, then your body's bandwidth is being diverted. We only have so much bandwidth, right? We're like a computer. Like there's only so much we can utilize at any given point in time. And when you're eating food and you're feeling depleted from that food, that means that your body is diverting mental brain energy to your gut for digestion, that it's taking a tax on your gut, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a leaky gut, but there's an indication there that that food is not necessarily serving you. It's requiring more energy. Then there's also tests. You can do functional lab tests. You can do skin is really the first indicator. If you have inflammatory conditions like autoimmune stuff, eczema or psoriasis or like weird skin issues, cystic acne, like those can be indicative of underlying gut inflammation. So yeah.
And then how would one go about curing that or changing that? Do you have to eat different food?
So any functional practitioner will test you to just make sure that they're not treating something that's not there. But once you get confirmation, then there's protocols that the Institute of Functional Medicine puts out. I believe there's 7 different food plans. And so those can also be modified for whatever it is that you're presenting with, because it's all very individualized. There are protocols, but it's like even past the protocols it's individualized based on your own specific circumstance. So depending on what sensitivities or intolerances you may or may not have and all of that, that's where like nutritionists come into play. And a lot of doctors, a lot of functional medicine practitioners are also versed in nutrition too. That is not something that I take responsibility for because I focus more on nervous system regulation, but I'm aware of how all of that plays in.
So that's a pretty good segue into what we were going to discuss today, the decoding signals from our body's wisdom. So how do you do that? So like the decoding comes in what ways, right? Understanding. And then what do we do with it, right? This emotional fluency that you mentioned before. What does that look like?
Well, so okay, when we think about stress, it feels like a lot of us are just continually stressed, right? And it doesn't matter what time of the year it is, doesn't matter if it's the holidays, whether it's summer, it's like we see someone cut us off on the freeway or whatever, and then we're triggered. Or we're in the grocery store and we're triggered. And it's just these like tiny little things that we're like, dude, man, I felt like I was just in a good place. And now I'm like, what? I'm like exploding, right? And that's human. So one thing I just want to preface this with is that when we talk about nervous system regulation, it's not that we're like Zen guru all the time. Like we're not. That is we would be a robot. That means we have no emotions. We are human. But when we learn how to regulate our nervous system, we're talking about getting to a new baseline of safety in our body and being able to notice when we are off kilter and being able to bring ourselves back to baseline quicker with more skills. Okay. And part of that process is having emotional fluency, meaning that we can understand, we can communicate to and with our body, understanding what's coming up for us and being able to express it or process it in a healthy way that allows us to move forward.
So what's an example? So say we're, driving along, we're in a car, we're on I-25, everything's great, the sun is shining, our favorite song is on, windows are open, and then all of a sudden some guy cuts us off and we're like, how would we practice this emotional fluency? Give us like a real live example of what we could do.
First of all, don't get mad at yourself for getting dysregulated. Don't get upset with yourself or get disappointed. Just realize, oh, that's an indication that there's a little bit of work to do here. And that's an indication that like, maybe I need to, take some time for myself and sit with this for a bit. Part of what I do in my sessions is finding out what's underneath that trigger. And it could be a lot of different things. So for someone in this circumstance, it could be related to them not being able to feel heard or acknowledged, that they're feeling diminished in some capacity from someone in their life or some circumstance in their life. It could be that they're resentful towards someone overshadowing them, or that could be anything. I love this example from one of my clients where every day she was driving home and she was, as soon as she would get home and she'd see her lawn was dry and she had to like fix her sprinkler system. And so her lawn was dead. And every time she drove home from work for like months, she got so upset as soon as she got home because she saw her dead lawn. As we dove deeper into the circumstance, that dead lawn was representative of her inability to ask for help, because in order to fix her sprinkler system, she needed to either hire someone or call her family member to come and help her. And neither one of those, she didn't want to pay for it. And she felt a burden on her family member. So she didn't ask for help. And it was this self-neglect. And we went deeper into this, and she brought out a lot of childhood stuff related to this feeling of unworthiness to ask for help. And so
keeping herself stuck. Like she was essentially keeping herself stuck because of that belief.
Right. Her body was bringing it to her awareness that we need to ask for help.
That's a great example. As you were talking before, it came to my mind a couple of times. What a gift these physical symptoms are.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful like package our entire system is, body, mind, soul, that the
It's perfect.
right? Like everything works in a perfect way to
Mhm.
show us, if we're only paying attention, what
Yeah.
needs to be
Yeah.
healed. There's really nothing that is kept from us. It's all that innate wisdom if we just look hard enough and get
Yeah.
honest, right? Honesty is probably
Yes,
a big
honesty.
part of what you do with, helping
Yeah.
women.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women, especially like our generation, we're taught from a young age that to kind of suppress these emotions and that we're not worthy of expressing ourselves, or our voice is not worth being heard, or
Mhm.
we are a burden because we're in the way, or and it's not intentional. It's not like
Right.
it's not like this intentional mean like setting. It's just that those were how we internalized the circumstances of our childhood, of those formative years. That was how we felt. And especially when we weren't given the opportunity to talk about it.
Yep.
And then these like pathways, these neural pathways in our brain get formed where when we talk about neural pathways and triggers and overcoming triggers, neural pathways are really like this highway in the brain that it's just been taken. Like this is just the highway that our thoughts continually take. And studies show that like we think 60, 70,000 thoughts a day, and largely like 90, 95% of those are the same thoughts. So, to be able to change our thought patterns, it's possible, but like it's just this like well-paved highway that our thoughts just continually take. And we want to take a different exit now. We want to
Mhm.
take a different way, right? And so we have to figure out, first of all, it's going to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's just what it's going to be,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
our body's going to want to try to protect us, right? And even if it's like a better situation, if it's unknown, that means it's unsafe
Yeah.
to our ego. And so we have to create these new ways of feeling. We have to rewire these neural pathways. First of all, that trigger, like actually let's go there. I'm going to take that exit. I'm going to take that exit now. Now we're like four-wheeling it because there's nothing here. Like we're just paving a new way, right?
Mhm.
But I'm going to take that exit again when I come up on it. And every time I take that exit, I'm paving it, I'm trailblazing. And over time, I feel safe here,
Mhm.
actually,
Mhm.
but it's like, how do we create that safety? We have to get really self aware and, like you said, honest. And we have to face these really uncomfortable things. They feel unsafe because we don't want to feel them, because sometimes feeling them means crying, and feeling them means emotional pain. But, like, that's the way to process.
Sure.
That's
And
the way to let it go.
yeah, and then the fear of what am I going what am I gonna feel? Like, I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna feel, so I'd rather stay in this
yeah. And what
discomfort
does it mean?
than what
Uh-huh.
I feel. Yeah, what does it mean? What is it gonna show me? Maybe I don't wanna know, So I think
Yeah,
people sometimes just choose to stay. So would
yeah.
but would you say that it's fair to say that if somebody does cut you off on the highway, there is a very human, normal reaction to, "Oh my god, I'm gonna get hit, I'm gonna die." Like, I don't know if anybody,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Have that thought, and then what you're talking about is what
yeah,
what ideally would come in very quickly after. You'd be like, "Oh my
yeah.
god," and then you wouldn't have to go chase the guy down.
So
You
that's
would
interesting that you bring that up. Yeah, because, yes, there's, like, this, like, innate survival instinct that comes over you, this actual physical safety thing that's like, "Yeah, you're gonna fucking piss me off if you're" sorry.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're, like, threatening my safety and you're gonna run me off the road,
Yeah.
like, of course. But the interesting thing is that around the 90-second mark, that emotion should have subsided. If you're still continually feeling amped up and there's something there that's still keeping you, then that whatever emotion was tied to that circumstance, there's more to it. You're
Gotcha.
not you're not letting go.
Mhm.
So, and
Mhm.
it could be that that initial feeling of unsafety triggered something else. But regardless, if you're still amped up like 90 seconds after the fact, then that's an invitation to dig a little deeper. Let it take you over for a minute or so. But then after that, if you're still like letting that change your energy and letting it change the way you're continuing to move throughout the day, then that's an indication that it's more than just a
Mhm.
response, an emotional response. This is something deeper that it has now, there's something in your body that has been awakened.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
a stuck emotion that wants to be acknowledged in your body because it's triggered. It's like reawakened. Does
And then
that
we
make
should
sense?
be totally. And then we should be able to shift onto that new exit, like you're talking about, reframing our thoughts, thinking,
Yeah.
So, but that takes probably a really long time. We're so lucky that we live in a time where we have all of these new tools
Yeah.
to rewire quickly and, much more quickly than if we were sitting here trying to think differently. Like it'll happen, but it'll take a really long time. So, do you use any sort of, like somatic tools and I know you do. So what
Oh,
do you
yeah.
do? What are your favorites? What should people do?
Yeah. So it's hard when you're like driving on the freeway and you have to
Oh
focus.
yeah.
Right. But even like at your next destination, it's hard at first when you're doing this work. Like I will speak for myself. It took me a very long time to be able to drop in and sense my body because I've been living so much of my life up here. And when you're trying to reconnect to your body and to feel into it and to hear what it's trying to say to you, that can be, first of all, like, I don't even know what that means. Like
Yeah.
for me, I was like, I don't even know how, like it took a long time. So it really does when you're first doing this work, like being able to sit in stillness and quietness and close your eyes and have someone guide you and to help you like figure that out. That's how I learned how to do it, through coaching. And once you feel like you have the ability where you could just tap into your body, it gets a lot easier, right? And then being able to listen, like, where is it in my body? What does it feel like? Like
Mhm.
naming it. Is there a message coming through? Even before that, is there a color? Is there a shape? Is there a size? Really like trying to identify it as best as you can. And there's no right or wrong answer. That's the thing, is like,
Yeah.
there's really no right or wrong
Yeah.
answer. It's just you trying to tap into this like intuition. And then not thinking about it too much though. That's the thing too, where people
Mhm.
get caught up. They start to, then they're up here and we
Yeah.
want you in here. And
Yeah.
so it's usually like the very first instinct, like, what's it trying to say to you? That's it.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because it's so spot on. It's hard. Sometimes it's not what you want to hear. Like sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
you think that you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm just trucking along, whatever. And then your body's like, you need to ask for help. Oh, that's a lot of work. That's
Yeah.
not easy to do.
So
I
I'm
don't
going to
want,
think something new. I'm going to override what I know to
right.
be true
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
this to make it work for me, to make it a little bit easier, to make it not true.
Right. And then we get into the ego and all of that, like our ego trying to protect us and trying to keep things status quo because that's safe and all of that. The other thing that's really interesting around emotions is, and it has to do with like the energy, our chakras in our body all have different meanings with our physical body, and how
Mhm. Mhm.
if there's any stagnant energy, meaning like if there's stuck emotions that are affecting the flow of energy, how that can show up too in our health and our physical health. And so just integrating all these different aspects and understanding that it's not just one thing. It is the physical. Physical's like I said, the most superficial, like the most easiest way to address it, but it's only going to do so much. You know what I mean? It is powerful, but even more powerful is addressing the energy inside.
Mm.
And it's more work.
Mm.
But if you really want to free yourself, that's where it's at,
Yeah.
you know? And it's an
Yeah.
ongoing. It's not like you just get to this destination like done. Okay. It's like
Oh yeah.
there's layers and layers
Oh
and
yeah.
layers and layers. Yeah.
Yeah, because once you see one thing, it kind of opens up the door to the next thing.
Yeah.
You feel the one layer, then you're ready or capable or more enlightened, more aware. And then other things come into your awareness that never would have maybe
Right.
before you healed this one thing. I remember being in therapy 4 years or so and something was going on. And I was like, I can't believe I'm dealing with this. Like after all the work I've done on myself and da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Probably sober like 15 years, and she was like, well, you had to deal with that thing. You had to heal that issue in that relationship or whatever it was to be able to now let this other thing come to the surface. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. And people just try to avoid it. But we also have a saying in recovery, when the pain gets great enough, right? Pain is a great motivator.
Yeah.
But you don't have to let yourself, listeners, people watching, you don't have to go, so low. You don't have to be in excruciating pain, whether it's physical or emotional,
Yeah.
to do this work. Set yourself free now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for an easy thing, you asked me like what an easy thing
Yeah.
to do is, and this is credited to Abraham Hicks, like really just go for the next best feeling thought. Like it doesn't have to be that you're going from anger to joy, because that's not possible. But like, how can you let yourself, if you listen to Abraham Hicks, then you know the analogy of the canoe flowing down the river, and like, rather than like continuing to try to muster up all of your strength and trying to go up the river, just let it carry you and find the next best feeling thought. Like, how could you reframe this to feel a little bit more at ease in this moment? In that case, like with that person cutting you off on the freeway, what about saying, wow, they must be having a really hard day and I don't know what's going on in their life, and but I'm not going to let it affect my energy. I mean, something along those lines where you're like, I have no idea what they're dealing with. If they feel the need to cut me off, like maybe they're oblivious, or maybe they're just like really struggling right now. It's somewhere in their life, but I have no way of knowing that. I'm just gonna let it go.
Yeah. Or not even making an excuse for them. I used to say like, oh, maybe they're getting to the hospital, or maybe there's something like really important, or maybe they just cut people off. And I just happened to be the person in the car at that moment, and it wasn't personal. I feel the best thing for me is when I take it out of this personalizing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Essentially, that's what it is like
they are.
Yeah. And it's not anything personally against you. It's nothing, it has nothing to do with you, really. It's just happenstance that you were the one
to be there. Yeah. Cut anybody else off, but we internalize, right? And we go to these other places. But yeah, it's all a big web. This is all like when you're talking about the holistic wellness.
So much. Yeah.
Well, everything is just all connected. And that's kind of like the basis, I guess, of the functional medicine concept, which I thought was just fascinating. I actually started seeing a functional medicine doctor for hormone stuff over at Vibrant Health, and I'm probably going to switch from my regular gynecologist over there, because why not? She can do all of it, right?
That's where I go. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to have one doctor who knows everything and can look at it from these other areas. I really love that concept.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because the other thing too is like along that line of the hormones, like the other thing is, and this is how I kind of describe it to my clients, is the state of our health is sitting on this three-legged stool, and in the concept of a three-legged stool, everything is interdependent on one another. Otherwise it doesn't stand, right? And so you have your endocrine, like hormone leg, and then you have your nervous system leg, where your stress response, and then you have your immune system, your body's response to inflammation. And that's the thing, is it's in other words, it's the functional medicine concept of the neuroendocrine immune axis is really this umbrella term. But like when you think about it, like you're on this three-legged stool, and if your hormones are wonky, there's probably something else going on with your immune system and your nervous system too, because they're all playing into it. And that's what a functional medicine practitioner is going to look at, all of those things. They're looking at like, how does the nervous system impact the hormones? How does the immune system impact the hormones, and vice versa? And so you're getting someone, and that's what I love. Like, that's what I love about functional medicine too, is coming from the conventional, like this is my 15th year as a nurse, and I'm not practicing at the bedside anymore, but I had 13 years of witnessing the loopholes and the gaps where like nobody's connecting these dots. I did case management for like 6 years. So I was that person trying to connect these dots with making sure the specialist read this note, and making sure that the doctor was updated on that outcome, and making sure that it was just like but not every system has case managers, and not every doctor acknowledges, not every physician acknowledges the impact of all the other, but in functional medicine, like that's one thing I really do appreciate is how global they're looking at everything.
It feels like it takes more time to do
It does.
that way, right? It takes more time rather than just going in. What are your symptoms? This is typically what it is. Check the box. Here you go. Here's your script. See ya. You're on your way. Like a
Yeah.
fact, right? So functional medicine probably feels a little bit more like, I don't know, person-centered, client-centered. You're really taking the time to see what's going on in these other areas, areas of their life.
Yeah. But that's important.
It is.
It's like so important.
It's huge. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're coming to the top of the hour here. So, is there anything that we did not cover that you want to do? You said so much. You helped me so much.
I hope I didn't like cause a storm of confusion because I
not
know
at
there's a lot.
all. No, not at all. It's great. I can't wait to go back and edit. When I edit, that's really when I learned so much from my guests. So
I bet, yeah.
Here.
I bet.
Well, do you have like one last bit of information or your own wisdom that you want to share with people?
I would just say that if you're finding yourself chronically stressed out, meaning you feel like nothing you do is like you can't experience joy anymore, you're feeling burnt out, there's so much hope. And it's an invitation for you to look inward and find out what you can do, because the external world is not going to change. Life is going to keep happening. Like life is going to keep lifing.
Yes.
And, you can think that, oh, I'll wait until this is in place, or I'll wait until after the holiday, or I'll wait until after this birthday or this vacation or whatever. Like you keep putting the placeholder further and further and nothing changes. Nothing's gonna change. Like there's never a right time. There's never the best time. Those are things that we tell ourselves. And all it does is keep us from finding healing. And if you're ever at a place where you're feeling yourself burnt out, now is the time. Don't keep putting it off to find someone to help you, regardless of whatever, wherever, whoever that is. Like just find help.
Yeah, because as you wait, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
Your health, it's not just going to take a back seat and wait for you to be ready to address it. When you do become ready a year or two from now or whenever it is, you're going to have more to clean up. It's going to be harder. Yeah. Those neural pathways are going to be carved in next year. And years.
And for people like me who get that very clear message from our bodies in the form of a breakdown, undeniably, this is real, but I didn't have to wait to that point. I knew along the way, and I was seeking out help, but I didn't get the right help until I finally found for me, it was functional medicine. I remember talking to various physicians at work about certain things, trying to pick their brain, and that, because they're not trained on that. They're not trained to look in this holistic way. It's a very indoctrinated, write a prescription or send a referral to a specialist for a procedure kind of thing. But just trust that, really whatever is showing up for you is for a reason. There is a reason why your body is feeling a certain way at any point in time. And really, when you think about how we're supposed to feel, this is getting a little spiritual, but we're supposed to experience joy. And joy is an indication that we are in alignment, that we are flowing, that we are moving in the right direction. Joy. And so if you're lacking joy in your life, then it's an invitation to take a deep look at what is going on in here, and in here.
Yes. That's awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much. Okay, so where can everybody find you? Where should they go and follow you?
I'm on, well, I know TikTok I don't even know what's going on with TikTok, but I'm on TikTok. Livewell.Lisa is my tag on all of the social media platforms. Right. So TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and then my website is omnilivewell.com.
And then what's this free boundaries workbook? Do you want to tell people about that?
Oh yeah. Well, this kind of, a lot of the times, when we're having emotional turmoil, and a lot of the women that I work with, it's around this aspect of self-worth, and people pleasing and perfectionism they tend to be the people that I work with. And interestingly, it's also like part of my journey too, but boundaries are a huge part of all of that. And so I have this free boundaries workshop or workbook that everyone can download, and it kind of explains the different kinds of boundaries, and it challenges you to look at different areas in your life to help reevaluate how those boundaries are or are not serving you.
And that's on your website, omnilivewell.com.
Yes.
Okay. And I will put all this information plus a link to schedule a free clarity call with Lisa. I will put that in the description. So go do that. Go talk to Lisa. I mean, you are just so brilliant, so smart, so intuitive. I mean, you're like the total package when it comes to this type of healing. So go seek Lisa out, and thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait to see you next week for coffee.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Amanda.
All right.
Thank you. You
Okay,
too.
bye.